This wasn't a drug bust. It wasn't piracy. It was something no one dared to imagine. A NATO assault on a Russian ghost ship. At dawn, off the coast of France, a rusted oil tanker was surrounded by black-clad commandos. Helicopters thundered overhead, engines screaming over the waves. Within minutes, the world's most secret shadow fleet had just lost one of its own. But this wasn't about oil. This was about a secret hidden in plain sight, a secret that could ignite the biggest confrontation between Russia and NATO since the Cold War. Because what the French Navy found on that ship wasn't cargo. It was evidence of a new kind of weapon, one that hides behind trade routes and sails under fake flags. And what happens next could decide the future of Europe itself. The sun hadn't yet touched the horizon when the order came. 2 NH-90 helicopters skimmed the waves, their blades slicing through the mist. Below them, the sea was calm. Too calm. Ahead lay the target, a rusting oil tanker named Boracay, anchored off the French coast, its flag barely hanging from the mast. For months, this ship had been just another ghost drifting through Europe's waters, part of Russia's shadow fleet, a network of more than 600 unregistered tankers built to dodge sanctions and smuggle oil. But this one was different. Satellite images showed strange metal containers on its deck, cables running across the rusted steel, and encrypted radio signals pulsing from inside. Something was alive on that ship, something not meant to be seen. At exactly 4:37 a.m., the operation began. Helicopters roared into position. Zodiac boats surrounded the tanker like wolves, circling wounded prey. Then came the command. Go. Ropes dropped. Within seconds, black-clad commandos descended onto the deck. The crew, half asleep, barely had time to react before they were face down, zip-tied, and silent. The bridge was taken. The engines were shut. The French flag rose. It was over in less than 10 minutes. No gunfire, no resistance, just the echo of boots on steel, and a single question hanging in the air. Why would France risk everything for one rusty ship? Because what they suspected that ship was carrying wasn't just oil. It was a new kind of weapon, one that could strike from anywhere, anytime, without warning. And 1 week earlier, it already had. A week before the raid, the skies over Copenhagen were calm, until they weren't. At 2:14 a.m., a swarm of unmarked drones appeared out of nowhere, gliding low over the harbor. No transponders. No call signs. Seconds later, a series of small explosions ripped through the docks. Targeted, precise, surgical. It wasn't terrorism. It was a test. Danish intelligence traced the electronic fingerprints back through a maze of servers, satellite links, and shell companies. All roads led to the same ghost network used by Russia's covert oil fleet. And one ship stood out. The Boracay. Officially, it was carrying Kazakh crude. Unofficially, it was transmitting encrypted data bursts every night, the same pattern used in the drone attack. In other words, this oil tanker was a floating command hub, disguised as a rust bucket. When the French commandos stormed aboard, what they found confirmed every suspicion. Inside the control room, hidden behind welded panels, were racks of advanced signal relays, military-grade, built to coordinate autonomous drones over thousands of kilometers. Next to them, a black briefcase with the emblem of Russia's main directorate of the General Staff, the GRU. It was no longer a mystery. The Boracay wasn't part of Russia's economic shadow fleet. It was part of its hybrid war fleet. Ships that hide in plain sight, pretending to be traitors, while waging invisible warfare across Europe's seas. And the timing couldn't have been worse, because just hours after the French raid, another ghost ship vanished from radar near the Baltic. Same size, same type, same encrypted signal. Europe realized the nightmare. This wasn't one operation. It was a network. After the Boracay seizure, intelligence agencies across Europe went into overdrive. Files once buried under classified labels were suddenly opened, and what they revealed was chilling. This wasn't a rogue vessel. It was a node. One of dozens. From Syria's Tartus port to Djibouti's shadow harbors, from Murmansk to Ceuta, an entire spiderweb of ships operated under fake names, ghost crews, and shell companies. Each one linked by encrypted satellite bursts to the same network, a digital bloodstream pulsing through the world's oceans. They called it the Phantom Line. On paper, these were commercial oil tankers, cargo freighters, and fishing boats. But inside, they carried far more than crude or cod. Hidden compartments packed with signal jammers, drone relays, and encrypted routers. Every ship a moving fortress, the eyes, ears, and claws of the Kremlin's unseen war. A single transmission from Moscow could activate any of them. A fake cargo manifest could disguise a weapons shipment. And every innocent refueling stop could mean an operation disguised as trade. The French raid on the Boracay had ripped the mask off. Suddenly, world leaders began asking the same question. If one ship like this was hiding in European waters, how many others were still out there? Reports soon surfaced. A tanker in the Red Sea changing its identity mid-voyage. A cargo vessel off Greece switching off its transponder for 48 hours. A rusted ship near Malta broadcasting Ukrainian signals, though the crew spoke Russian. It wasn't coincidence, it was choreography. And behind the curtain stood one man, a former Russian admiral turned energy tycoon, now under sanctions, but operating through front companies in the UAE and Singapore. He called his operation Project Miravoy, global. Its goal, to control the world's invisible logistics, trade routes, fuel lines, and data flow, all under the cover of legitimate business. By the time NATO realized the scale, the network had already spread across 5 continents, and the Boracay was just the spark that revealed the fire. But as investigators closed in, something even darker surfaced. Secret ports built in friendly nations, under commercial leases, where ships could dock without inspection. And inside those ports were satellite dishes, camouflaged hangars, and underground fuel tanks. Someone was preparing for a long war, one fought not with missiles, but with ghosts on the water. Within hours of the Boracay raid, the story should have been everywhere. A NATO strike on a Russian ghost ship, headline gold. But something strange happened. The footage vanished. Satellite images blurred. And journalists who tried to publish early reports received quiet calls from official sources, warning them to stand down. Behind closed doors, the operation had triggered a diplomatic panic, because what the French commandos found aboard didn't just implicate Moscow, it brushed dangerously close to Western allies. Inside the Boracay's onboard database, investigators discovered payment trails leading through Cyprus, Dubai, and even London shell companies. Some of the money funding Russia's Phantom Fleet had passed through legitimate Western banks, laundering itself clean before vanishing into the sea. So when the French military drafted its report, entire pages were redacted. The official line read simply, "Routine maritime interception." No further comment. Off the record, insiders called it the biggest maritime scandal since the Cold War. Whistleblowers began leaking fragments, encrypted emails, satellite logs, even drone telemetry from the ship's command corps. Each leak pointed to the same conclusion. The Boracay was part of a coordinated shadow trade that several governments preferred to ignore because it kept oil prices stable. And then came the most damning piece, a memo from a European energy minister suggesting that disruption of covert maritime flows could destabilize markets. Translation: don't touch it. That's when the cover-up turned into a conspiracy. Journalists who persisted found their social accounts hacked, their data wiped. One researcher's car caught fire outside her home in Warsaw. Another disappeared during a boating accident off the coast of Portugal. By now, public curiosity was growing faster than officials could suppress it. Anonymous videos appeared online showing parts of the French raid, commandos storming a rusted deck under moonlight. For weeks, the encrypted drive from the Boracay sat locked inside a NATO cyber lab outside Brussels. It was unlike anything analysts had seen. Military encryption fused with blockchain signatures, hidden behind layers of decoy code. Dozens of experts tried to crack it. None succeeded. Then, on October 19th at 3:42 a.m., a low-level technician named Anya Kovalenko broke through a fragment of the code by accident, a simple error in the ship's timestamp algorithm. What she uncovered made her blood run cold. The drive wasn't just coordinates. It was a map, a living, pulsing digital chart of every ship, every drone, and every underwater relay connected to Russia's Phantom Line. A network spanning oceans, coded in bursts of light and data. Each blinking dot represented a vessel, and dozens of them were moving right now. But one section caught her eye. In the North Atlantic, far from any trade route, 3 dots formed a perfect triangle. And in the center, a blank zone, a dead spot where no signal could penetrate. The metadata called it Node 0. When the file reached NATO command, alarms erupted across secure channels. If the Phantom Line was real, then Node 0 was the control nexus, the digital brain of the entire operation. And according to the timestamps, it was active. Right that moment, a joint task force scrambled to trace the coordinates. They pointed to an area of ocean halfway between Iceland and Greenland, a stretch of water known for violent storms and magnetic interference. No official route passed through it. No ship should have been there. And yet, radar picked up a signal, faint, moving slowly, like something vast drifting beneath the surface. Satellite imagery showed what looked like an abandoned drilling platform, half submerged, tilting in the waves. But under infrared, it glowed, alive with heat signatures and power readings. It wasn't abandoned. It was operational. At dawn, NATO launched a reconnaissance flight. Minutes after takeoff, the plane's feed went dark. Static. Then nothing. The last transmission from the pilot was a single sentence. "It's not a platform, it's a base." Silence followed. And just like that, Node 0 disappeared from the map, as if the ocean swallowed it whole. But deep within the Boracay's recovered code, a final message flickered before the server shut down. Phase 2. Initiated. No one knows who sent it, or from where. But one thing was clear. The Phantom line wasn't finished. It had just gone dark. After Node 0 vanished, the world went eerily quiet. No press releases, no updates, no confirmation from NATO or the French Ministry of Defense. It was as if the entire operation had been erased from existence. But silence has a way of echoing. Weeks later, fishermen off the coast of Norway began reporting strange signals on their sonar, metallic shapes rising from the deep, then vanishing just as quickly. In Greece, a cargo ship mysteriously lost all navigation for 11 minutes, drifting in perfect circles before power returned. And near the Black Sea, Ukrainian radar detected ghost vessels, ships with no identification, broadcasting phantom transponders that mimicked NATO patrols. Something was moving beneath the surface. Something coordinated. Behind closed doors, NATO officials met in secret war rooms. They refused to speak publicly, but leaked memos painted a disturbing picture. Multiple nations had quietly elevated their maritime threat level to, quote. The message was clear. The Phantom line had gone dark, but it was still alive. Then came the first undeniable sign. On November 11th, at exactly midnight, 7 oil tankers across 3 oceans simultaneously broadcasted the same encrypted message. PL. Node 0 restored. The transmissions lasted less than a second, too brief for full decryption, but enough to trigger alarms worldwide. Within hours, satellite feeds over the North Atlantic began flickering again. And once more, a familiar triangle appeared in the data stream, the same shape seen weeks before. But this time, the dead zone wasn't between Iceland and Greenland. It had moved south, closer to the British Isles. Ports went on silent alert. Civilian radar feeds were restricted. And as dawn broke, naval patrols quietly spread across the Atlantic, pretending it was routine exercise. At 3:42 a.m. GMT, on November 15, 2025, every NATO radar system in the North Atlantic registered the same impossible event. A signal. A single, pulsing frequency originating from somewhere off the coast of Ireland, powerful enough to momentarily scramble civilian GPS across Western Europe. At first, analysts believed it was another solar flare. Then the pulse repeated. Exactly 7 times, each burst spaced 1 minute apart. 7. The same number of tankers that had sent the encrypted message. PL. Node 0 restored. In a dimly lit command center in Brussels, the screens began to fill with red markers. Unidentified vessels. Unregistered transponders. Moving fast, headed toward the British and French coastlines, in perfect formation. The Phantom line had awakened. Meanwhile, in the cold gray waters off Cornwall, a Royal Navy destroyer, HMS Vigilant, was the first to make visual contact. What the crew saw defied logic. A cluster of cargo ships, rusted and skeletal, yet moving with eerie synchronization, as if guided by one mind. No flags, no signals, no crew on deck. And then, from their decks, the hatches opened. Dozens of drones launched into the night sky, glowing faintly red, flying low over the waves. But these weren't ordinary drones. Each carried a small, spherical pod, the kind used for electronic warfare jamming. Within seconds, communication lines went dark. The destroyer's radar screens filled with static. The sea became a mirror of silence and confusion. The Ghost Fleet had become an army. Across Europe, alarms began to ring. The French Navy scrambled its Atlantique II aircraft. The British RAF went to full intercept readiness.
Fire!
And in Brussels, the NATO Secretary General gave the order no one had expected to ever hear. Activate Article 5 protocols. This is an attack, but this time the response was not chaotic. France had been waiting for it. Within minutes, Operation Iron Veil was launched. A multinational strike group, led by France's Charles de Gaulle carrier, moved to intercept. Stealth drones deployed. A WACS planes formed an electronic dome. The goal? Find Node 0. Because the formation of ghost ships was not random. They were circling a point, a moving center, something transmitting through them, controlling them like puppets. Node 0 was no longer hidden inside a ship. It had become a floating network, transmitting across the fleet itself. A mind made of steel and oil. At 5:17 a.m., the French commandos who had once seized the Boracay received a final encrypted order. cut the link. Their target, a rusted vessel approaching Brest under fog cover. The Boroisk, sister ship of the Borokai. Thermal cameras showed movement on deck. Containers welded shut. No visible crew. The order was given. The strike came from the sky. 2 precision missiles. 1 hit amidships. The second, seconds later, pierced the deck container. For a fraction of a second, the ocean lit up with a burst of blue-white light, an electromagnetic pulse that rippled through the waves, shutting down sensors for hundreds of miles. Then, silence. When the systems came back online, all 7 ghost vessels had vanished from radar. The sea was empty again. Node 0 had been destroyed. Or so it seemed. Hours later, as dawn broke, technicians at NATO's Cyber Command reviewed the wreckage data streaming from satellites. They froze when they saw it, embedded deep in the frequency spectrum of the EMP burst, an outgoing signal. A string of binary data, repeating endlessly, traveling east, toward the Arctic Circle. Decoded, it said. Phantom line, Node 1 activated. The War of Shadows wasn't over. It had just evolved.